and they're coming.
Your family needs you, son.
Beulah Jackson built an empire on secrets, and one of those secrets just collapsed on the floor in front of everyone she loves. The question now isn't just whether she survives the next 10 minutes, it's whether the truth she's been burying for 40 years survives with her. Episode 7 of Dutton Ranch, titled Den of Sin, didn't just shake the Petal Ranch. It tore the roof off the entire Jackson family history, and by the time the credits rolled, Beulah Jackson was on the ground, clutching her chest, with everyone she's manipulated for decades standing around her in stunned silence. Episode 8, officially titled Whiskey Limits, premieres June 26th on Paramount Plus, and based on everything we know so far, it's about to answer the one question fans have been screaming since Friday morning. Is Beulah Jackson actually going to die? Let's rewind for a second, because to understand why this matters so much, you need to understand what Beulah just revealed about herself. The episode opens in Fort Worth, Texas, back in August of 1981. A young Beulah is out at a dance hall with her driver and chaperone, a man named Mariano, trailing behind her. She meets a charming stranger named Luke. The two of them dance to a Waylon Jennings track, and for a moment it looks like a sweet, almost innocent flashback. Then Luke pays off the bartender to distract Mariano, lures Beulah away from the bar, and assaults her. When Mariano finally tracks her down at a motel, the damage is already done. Beulah, bruised and shaken, doesn't ask for comfort. She orders Mariano to tell her father she fell off a mechanical bull. That single moment tells you everything about who Beulah Jackson is and who she was always going to become. She doesn't process trauma. She controls the narrative around it. Here's where the episode takes its darkest turn. Weeks later, Beulah discovers she's pregnant. Instead of spiraling, she has Mariano drive her straight to Luke's house. Everyone watching assumes she's going to tell him the truth, maybe even ask for help. Instead, Beulah kills him. No hesitation, no monologue, just cold, calculated violence from a woman who had already decided that no man would ever control her story again. That child she was carrying is Rob, and suddenly an entire season's worth of tension between mother and son makes horrifying sense. Rob isn't just Beulah's son. He's the living result of the worst night of her life, and you have to wonder how many times she looked at him over the years and saw Luke's face instead of her own. This is also where Orina's earlier comment lands with full weight. Back in episode 4, Orina told Beulah flatly that she was the one who created Rob's demons. At the time it sounded like a granddaughter being dramatic. Now it sounds like a diagnosis. If Beulah spent decades unable to separate her son from her trauma, that would explain the coldness, the favoritism games, and the way Rob has spent his entire adult life trying to prove he's worth loving. It also reframes every single one of his worst decisions this season, not as random villainy, but as the predictable outcome of being raised by a woman who never fully forgave him for existing. Then there's Joaquin, and this is where episode 7 quietly drops one of its biggest bombs. We learn that Mariano, Beulah's loyal driver and the same man who witnessed her assault and helped her dispose of Luke's body, is Joaquin's father. Beulah didn't just hire Joaquin out of kindness. She raised him, trained him, and groomed him to one day run the Petal Ranch, and the timing lines up with a debt that goes far deeper than employment. My read on this is simple. Mariano carried Beulah's darkest secret for 40 years, and in return, Beulah promised his son a future Mariano himself could never give him. That's not loyalty. That's leverage dressed up as family. Which brings us to the party. The 190th anniversary celebration of the Petal Ranch was supposed to be Beulah's moment to finally name Joaquin as her successor, and by every measure, he earned it. He went to A&M, built his reputation clean, and spent years quietly cleaning up messes Rob left behind. Then Rob shows up uninvited, fresh off leaving a man for dead in the previous episode, armed, furious, and absolutely done waiting his turn. He corners Beulah and makes the threat explicit. Name Joaquin and Rob will kill him. Beulah, a woman who has never once backed down from a fight in her entire life, folds instantly. She stands in front of her guests, her family, and her business partners and names Rob Will as her heir. Joaquin doesn't even get an explanation. He just watches the future he built his entire life around get handed to the brother who threatened murder to take it. That moment alone should tell you how dangerous Rob Will actually is, because Beulah Jackson does not fold for ordinary men. The fallout from that announcement happened almost immediately. Zane Nash, the CEO of Frontier Hospitality and the man Beulah had been courting for a major beef supply deal, confronted her on the spot. Their entire arrangement, the one that was supposed to put 10 Petal beef on restaurant menus across Texas, was suddenly hanging by a thread because no serious business partner wants to sign a long-term contract with a ranch that just handed control to an unstable, violent heir in front of a room full of witnesses. That tension was still boiling when Rip stepped in to physically restrain Carter, who had grabbed a prized bullhead that clearly meant something deeply personal to Beulah. The second it hit the floor, something in her broke. She grabbed at her neck, staggered, and collapsed in front of everyone, and the episode cut to black before anyone could tell us whether she was breathing. Now we know exactly what happens next, because Paramount Plus has already confirmed it. Episode 8, Whiskey Limits, opens with Beulah getting rushed to the hospital, and the preview clip makes it clear this isn't a quiet recovery story. This is the moment the entire ranch war stops being about land and inheritance and starts being about survival. One line from the preview stands out above everything else. Someone tells Beth and Rip flat out, the Jackson family is crooked. They ain't ranchers. They're thieves. That's not a throwaway insult. That's a direct accusation aimed at the family Beulah built her empire on, and given everything we just learned about her past, it might be the most honest thing anyone has said about the Jacksons all season. If that accusation starts spreading through Rio Paloma while Beulah is unconscious in a hospital bed, unable to control the narrative the way she always has, the consequences could be brutal for everyone wearing the Jackson name, including Joaquin, who did nothing wrong except trust the wrong family. That brings us to Beth, and this is where things get genuinely tense for the Duttons. In the same preview, Beth looks directly at Carter and tells him, I need you ready for the hard parts when they come, because they're coming. That's not a casual warning. Beth Dutton does not prepare people for hypothetical danger. She prepares them for danger she can already see arriving. After everything Carter just did at the party, smashing something that clearly mattered to Beulah and triggering her collapse, Beth has every reason to believe Rob Will is going to come looking for someone to blame, and Carter is an easy target. He's young, he's emotional, and he just gave Rob Will a convenient excuse to act like the victim instead of the man who threatened to murder his own brother days earlier. If Rob Will decides Carter needs to pay for what happened, Beth and Rip are not going to sit back and let that happen quietly, and that alone could be the spark that finally drags the Duttons into open conflict with the Jacksons instead of just working alongside them. Let's talk about Rip for a second, because his patience with Rob Will has been running thin since long before the party. Rip already knows Rob Will is the reason there's a dead body on his land from earlier in the season, and now he's watching the same man manipulate his way into total control of a ranch through threats and intimidation. Rip Wheeler has never been the type to wait around for someone else to handle a problem, and with Beulah unconscious and unable to rein her son in, there's a real chance Episode 8 puts Rip directly in Rob Will's path. Whether that ends in a tense standoff or something far more physical depends entirely on how reckless Rob Will gets in the hours after he realizes his mother might not be coming back to stop him. And then there's Joaquin, who is arguably the most quietly devastating storyline heading into this episode. He didn't just lose a job title at that party. He lost the one thing he had built his entire identity around, handed to a man who got it through pure intimidation. Actor Juan Pablo Raba has already described this as the worst possible outcome for his character, someone who did everything the right way and still watched it get stripped away in front of a room full of people. The real question for Episode 8 is what Joaquin does with that humiliation. Does he stay loyal to a family that just publicly chose violence over loyalty, or does he start looking for a way to take back what he believes is rightfully his, especially once people start whispering that the Jacksons are thieves instead of ranchers? If Joaquin starts pulling away from Beulah's orbit at the exact moment she's most vulnerable, that could open a door for him that Rob Will never saw coming. There's also the matter of what Beulah's collapse actually was, and the show has been deliberately vague about it. Some signs point toward a heart attack, especially given how suddenly she grabbed her chest, but a stroke isn't off the table either, considering her age and the sheer emotional weight of everything happening around her in that moment. Either way, whatever doctors find in that hospital room is going to determine how much control Beulah has left to exert over a family that's clearly starting to splinter without her. Then there's Everett McKinney, and out of every relationship on this show, his might be the one that hits hardest right now. Ed Harris has played Everett as a quiet, steady presence next to a woman who rarely lets anyone get close to her, and he was standing right beside Beulah when she went down. Whatever happens medically, this collapse is going to force Everett to confront something he's probably avoided for years, which is that Beulah Jackson is not invincible. She built an empire on being the toughest person in every room, and Everett built a relationship with her by accepting that toughness instead of challenging it. If episode 8 puts him in a hospital hallway waiting for news, watching the woman he loves fight for her life after finally revealing the worst thing she ever did, that's not just emotional television. That's the moment Everett has to decide whether loving Beulah means standing by her no matter what she's capable of, or finally seeing her clearly for the first time. And we can't talk about episode 8 without circling back to Mariano, because his story is far from finished. He helped Beulah dispose of a body in 1981, raised a son who grew up believing he earned everything on merit, and never once let Joaquin know the truth about how deep his family's connection to the Jacksons actually runs. Secrets like that don't stay buried forever, especially not on a show built entirely around old sins clawing their way back into the present. If Beulah doesn't survive, or even if she does but loses her grip on the ranch, there's a real chance the full story of Mariano, Luke, and that motel room finally reaches Joaquin and Robwell directly. Imagine what that does to Robwell, a man who just threatened to kill his own brother to protect a birthright built on his mother's murder. And imagine what it does to Joaquin, who spent his entire life being groomed by the same woman who buried his father's silence for decades. Neither of them is walking away from that truth unchanged. Irina deserves attention here too, because she's been quietly playing both sides all season, and the timing of her comment about Robwell's demons feels less like an accident and more like foreshadowing the show planted on purpose. She clearly knows something the rest of the family doesn't fully grasp yet, and with Beulah out of commission, Irina suddenly has more room to maneuver than she's had all year. Whether she uses that room to protect the family or to settle her own score is exactly the kind of tension that makes the final stretch of the season so unpredictable. So, where does that leave us heading into Whiskey Limits? Based on everything Paramount has revealed so far, the hospital becomes ground zero for this episode, and the fallout from Beulah's collapse ripples out into every other relationship on the ranch. My honest read is that Beulah survives this. The show has spent an entire season humanizing her, peeling back the layers between the cold businesswoman and the terrified young woman in that motel room, and killing her off immediately after that reveal would waste every bit of that work. But surviving and recovering are two very different things. Even if she pulls through, there's a strong chance Beulah is forced off the ranch for an extended recovery, and that absence is exactly the kind of opening Robwell has been waiting his entire life for. He finally has the title he threatened murder to get, and now he might get it without his mother around to supervise a single decision he makes. That's the real danger heading into these final episodes. Robwell spent years wanting power without ever learning how to handle it responsibly, and the one person who could have reined him in might be lying in a hospital bed unable to say a word. Beth and Rip are not going to stand by quietly if he starts making reckless moves that threaten Carter or the people they care about, and Joaquin is not going to forget that he was passed over for a man who got there through threats. Add in a community that's starting to whisper that the entire Jackson family are thieves instead of ranchers, and you've got every ingredient for the messiest, most explosive stretch this show has given us yet, with only 2 episodes left to let it all collide. What makes this story land so hard isn't just the drama, or the threats, or the secrets clawing their way to the surface. It's watching a woman who spent 40 years convincing everyone, including herself, that she was untouchable, finally get forced to confront the one thing she could never control, which is her own body giving out at the exact moment her family needed her most. That's the kind of moment that sticks with you long after the episode ends, because underneath all the ranch politics and power struggles, this has always been a story about what trauma does to people when they bury it instead of facing it, and about how that burial eventually comes due, one way or another, for everyone connected to it. We'll know soon enough whether Beulah survives, whether Robwell spirals out of control, and whether Joaquin finally breaks free from a family that just chose violence over loyalty right in front of him. Until then, I want to hear your theory. Do you think Beulah makes it through this? Or is this finally the end for her? Drop your prediction in the comments, because I genuinely want to know what you think is coming next. If this breakdown helped you make sense of everything that just happened, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and join the channel so you don't miss the moment episode 8 actually drops. I'll be right back here breaking down every twist the second Whiskey Limits airs. So I'll see you in the next one.